Brown algae falls into the phylum called Phaeophyta. And this is the largest of all the plant-like algae. This is the um, algae that grows to be the tallest. And they're mostly marine, and they're usually off of really rocky coast. You see a lot of brown algae off of the coast of California, if you've ever been to California. And these are what are commonly called kelp. Now, because they're brown, they have this secondary pigment called fucoxanthin, and that's what gives it its brown pigment. With our brown algae, they have a very, very long, slender body. So the body of the kelp is actually called a thallus. You do have a figure in your book, if you're referencing your book, of kelp, and many of you have probably seen kelp or kelp beds. I know that if you've been to California, you've seen kelp beds. But the very long body part of it is called the thallus. The thallus is very flat and blade-like. It's like the blade of a grass. So think of that long, slender portion. That's what the thallus is. Then it has got a stalk-like part to it, and that's called the stipe. And then there is a root-like structure that holds it in the sand at the bottom of the ocean. Now, this is not a true root, so it's just root-like, but it is called the holdfast, and it just holds it. But they're not that strong because kelp can easily be pulled up out of the sand. Now, at the base of the thallus, there is a bulging portion, and it is called the bladder. And what happens with it is it's actually filled with air, and it's what keeps the algae floating near the surface of the water so that it can be near light and it can carry out photosynthesis. Kelp beds are very common for small fish because you can get tangled up in kelp beds. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who get stranded in the ocean end up drowning because kelp wraps around their legs and can actually, cause them to panic, and they end up drowning. But kelp beds are very common for small fish to live in because they can hide. It gives them cover. But then again, the sharks know that the small fish are there, and they end up trolling through there. Now, one thing about all algae, and I should have mentioned before, is that it's a wonderful food source for people because it has got a lot of nutrient content to it. It's very high in protein, and there are trace minerals. Remember, those are, trace elements and minerals. Those are minerals and elements that are needed in very small amounts, and they have a lot of vitamins. So some of these algae are very prominent in our foods. And with brown algae, I don't know if you can see there at the bottom or not, they're stabilizers. And what they're used in is syrups and ice creams and in some paint. They sort of stabilize the product, or kind of, it's not really a thickener, but it's kind of like a thickener. And so syrups have that consistency of being a lot thicker than something like water. And a lot of times it's due to thickeners that are used in brown algae, from brown algae.